he is the biggest red flag in this draft.
Welcome back to Big Time Fantasy Football. You're here with your hosts, Nick and Zach. Today we're getting into 5 more wide receiver prospect profiles headed into this 24 draft class.
It's a deeply insane class, yes. We just have one more group of guys here that we're going to go over for receivers. And before we get into it, please give us a like, subscribe. As always, we're a new channel, so it helps a lot to help us grow, and we appreciate every single one of you guys.
All right. Zach, you want to get started with the first guy?
Okay, yeah, so we have Brian Thomas Jr. He's 6'4", 205, and 21 years old. The NFL player comparisons that I gave him is he has that Nico Collins / Martavis Bryant type build where he's a big field stretcher, can win up top. He led the nation in touchdowns last year, which is obviously great production. He had 17 of them. And this came alongside Malik Nabers, one of the top prospects in this year's draft. If he was in a lot of other drafts, he would be number one. But he still had that production alongside an elite competition, which I think goes a lot to speak towards him. He had 13.5 yards per target, which is a great mark to have. But he was kind of a one-year wonder. If you kind of look at the stats that we had on the last screen there, he didn't have a great first couple of years, and then he really broke out that last year. So it remains to be seen if that's something he can do consistently. He is a raw prospect. He loses balance on cuts, off routes, off jams. He can lose his balance. And he did have limited routes that he ran with the top-tier guys in our last receiver video. You heard me saying that a full route tree. This wasn't as much of the case with him. He's running a lot of vertical seams, and that's where he got his production, which you see for a lot of college players. And he had a 10% drop rate. He tries to do a lot of body catches and things like that, that's way too high of a rate, and you don't want to see that as an NFL scout. So,
yeah, definitely a great prospect, especially his production alongside of Malik Nabers, like you said. Definitely going to be a deep threat guy, probably in the league as well. Hopefully that can turn into consistent production for him. But
for sure.
Next guy we're getting into, Adonai Mitchell. He's 6'2", 205 pounds, 21 years old. He was part of another great duo. He's part of the Texas duo. We comped him to a George Pickens, DeAndre Hopkins. Definitely a guy that can make some contested catches, great down the field, and great speed as well. Great speed and athletic ability is Adonai's main calling card. He was 90-plus percentile in the 40-yard dash, the vertical jump, and the broad jump. Along with that, he has great body control and flexibility, so he can really contort his body while the ball's in the air to make sure that he comes down with the ball. He's a very smooth route runner. His speed and athletic ability really help that. He can get in and out of cuts really fast, leave a defender in the dust. Matching that with his great hands, he's really good at making the quarterback's life easier, especially on down the field targets. He's really good at tracking the ball. He can speed up, slow down, move his body where he needs to in order to make the catch over defenders. He does need to improve against press coverage. He really didn't do too great throughout his college career, but I think if he improves on that, his game will be a lot more well-rounded. And he is inconsistent after the catch as well. He's really not going to make too many guys miss and break off long runs after the catch like some of the other prospects we have coming out this year. I do want to say as well real quick, he is a gamer for sure. As soon as he got into the college football playoffs, he had 5 touchdowns throughout his 3 years. He was in it all 3 years, and he really turned it on when the lights were the brightest.
Yeah, and that Texas duo really was a nightmare to kind of keep up with both of them having that great speed. So both of them are definitely great speedsters guys. And obviously the other guy we'll get into a little bit later, but might even be the next guy. But yeah, great duo there. He has great hands, like you said. All that was true. And here he is. Look at here. The other guy, Xavier Worthy. My brain refuses not to call him Xavier Woods every chance I get just because the Cowboys DB. But he is Xavier Worthy. He's 5'11", 165 pounds, 21 years old. His NFL comparison that I gave to him is a Tank Dell and a Tutu Atwell, just because of his size. And he's projected right now to go 17th to the Chiefs, which, if that is end up being his landing spot, then he, I think, is probably the wide receiver 4, pushing wide receiver 3 in this class. So that is obviously one of the best landing spots that you can get. But he led Texas in receiving yards every year, which, like we said, he had another running mate, and still he was the one that led, which I think goes a long way to say good about him. He had that record 40 time. He is about 165, so I personally think there was just a strong breeze on his back and kind of pushed him a little forward, but he was out there flying. He has, obviously, the size is a big thing. Like I said, he's 165. It's not great size for the NFL, and everyone last year obviously fell in love with Tank Dell because he was the kind of first guy to break the model, being that small guy and have success. But I just want to remind everybody that Tank Dell is the exception that proves the rule. He's like 1 in 150 players that comes out at that size and has success. But even though he does have a small frame, he is unafraid of contact, which kind of goes both ways. You don't want a smaller guy taking a lot of hits, but he's not going to shy away from it. So he'll try to fight for an extra yard. If he has the chance to step out, he'll try to go through a guy instead, which I think is impressive. He has that dog in him. And a lot of his production did come from screens and catches behind the line. If you take those away, then his numbers do look slightly less impressive. But if the NFL can kind of use him in a spread type way, like a Shanahan or, a Chiefs style offense where they can get him manufactured touches, I think that's kind of going to be where his skill set would best shine through. And he's not a great on his contested catches. He was 5 for 21 on contested catches, which his small frame, he just gets thrown off easier. Happens at the line, but also down the field when he's trying to make catches. He can't really hand fight or go over guys because of his slight frame. And honestly, I think he is the biggest red flag in this draft. I'm personally avoiding him in my rookie drafts, but I mean, I do wish the best for him. Hopefully, he can be one of the exceptions, but I think there's just too much going against him.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I like his teammate, A.D. Mitchell, but Xavier Worthy definitely too undersized for me. I just don't know if he can make a full NFL career out of what he's done. He produced in college, great, but it's a whole different ballgame when you get to the NFL. So we shall see. The Chiefs' landing spot might help his draft stock, but I definitely will be avoiding him as well.
Yeah, definitely. And one more thing I wanted to say is with that speed, every time someone comes out and has a super high 40, people push them up their own rookie drafts. I think that makes him a better NFL talent than it does as fantasy, just because the field stretching option, it helps players around him more so than it's going to help himself. He's going to have a couple boom games just with that speed for sure, but being a field stretcher, you don't get the consistency that a full package player gets.
Next guy we're getting into, Keon Coleman, a very polarizing draft prospect, but I'm a big fan of Keon Coleman. There are some red flags. His numbers and production don't look too amazing, especially this past year. He had a little bit of a dip, but I think that's at the fault of Florida State. I just don't think they use him too well. But his frame, 6'4", 215. He's only 20 years old. And we have an NFL comparison. I think Brandon Marshall is more an NFL comparison to his ability right now. And projecting out, I think if he's used right, he could be a Michael Thomas type player. He really didn't test well, as you can see. 4.61 in the 40, pretty slow. 1.54 split isn't too bad. It shows he's got a little bit of burst, and he has good jumping numbers as well. But he did lead all players. The NFL tracked speed for all the receivers during the gauntlet drill, and he had the fastest speed among all wide receivers. Like I said, Keon Coleman, great size and frame. He really uses his body and is able to improve his contested catch ability using his frame. He is an all-around athlete. He did play basketball and football at Michigan State when he was there for his first 2 years before transferring. but he has really good body control, just like AD Mitchell, but I think his is even a little bit better. He has a longer frame, so he's able to really reach out, and even if he jumps in one spot, he's able to reach over and catch the ball in another spot. And when you pair that with his incredible hands, I feel like he's just a quarterback's best friend. He's going to make it so much easier on him. Even if you're off target a little bit, he'll be able to come down with it. He is that alpha type receiver. I think if he can develop a little bit in his route running, improve his ability to separate, he can work more in that short game, short to intermediate range. I feel like at Florida State, basically all of his film is just deep go balls that are prayers that sometimes he comes down with, or it's a screen pass. So it does show that they want to get him the ball, but that's really, I don't think that's going to be his forte if he is successful in the NFL. I think more like that Michael Thomas intermediate range type of route tree would be best for him. Like I said, he can improve as a route runner. One of his biggest knocks is that he can't separate, or he's inconsistent with separating, especially down the field. If he improves that, he's only 20 years old, he has time, he can be very successful. And he also needs to put in more effort as a run blocker. Keeps you on the field longer if you can block and they trust you, even when it's a run play. So I think that's his two biggest knocks. How do you feel about Keon Coleman?
Yeah, Keon Coleman was kind of like a guy you said that's been falling down draft boards. I think he's all the way at 93rd now, or somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s. So he has kind of fallen off just from what NFL scouts have gotten to see from him. I know he's someone you're high on. So hopefully his positive attributes can overcome, those negatives. And depending on his landing spot, he could be a guy that does get a lot more love come fantasy draft season. Then we got Troy Franklin, who is currently projected to go to the Commanders. I don't love that landing spot, so we'll see where he really did end up. And it's left to see what they're going to do with quarterback. But getting into him specifically, he's 6'2", 176 pounds, 21 years old. The NFL player comparison that I gave him is Chosen Anderson, formerly known as Robbie Anderson. Just that another field stretcher type of guy that's kind of his main calling card. And with a slender frame as well. So Troy Franklin, I felt it important to say that he was 69th percentile in broad jump. I'm not doing any other percentiles. I just thought that was an important one to get out there. And he does play faster than his 4.4 speed. Like I said, that Chosen Anderson comparison is because of his speed and slight frame. But he ran a 4.41 at the combine. He did have a flu during the combine, which, a lot of people can make excuses about things. But if you watch any of his highlights, his tape, his film, his breakdowns, you see that he runs faster than that. Even though that's obviously not a bad speed, he does play faster than that. He did have 14 touchdowns in his final season, which the Brian Thomas Jr. led with 17. So 14 is not too far off of that. So obviously he had a productive season as far as touchdowns go. 36% of his total catches over his last season were deemed explosive plays. If he got the ball in his hands, he was able to make a move with all that speed there. I don't think that's going to be obviously the highest rate in the NFL, but he did show that in college. He had a 30-yard reception in 12 out of 13 games this last season, which huge chunks at one time. And he's another guy kind of that I said earlier that he's going to have those big games. He's going to have 4-catch, 140-yard, 2-touchdown games. But that's not something I see with the skill set that he has shown so far that's going to be consistent. Size is a big thing for him. I already kind of mentioned he's only 176, has a slight frame. He might be thinner even than really that. But, yeah. And with that size, it kind of leads into him not being a great press beater. And if he's not doing it great in college, when he gets to the NFL and guys are stronger and faster, it's not going to get better for him. And he had to win early on his routes. So if he didn't beat the guy off the line, then he's not doing well with his hand fighting and working down the field like that. And he did have 9 drops. Another guy with a tendency to try to body catch. And he did only have, I believe, 3 in his second to last season, in his sophomore season. But, yeah, he did have 9 in that last one, which is too many. So if he improves his technique and he can find a way to use that speed, positively in a kind of a rounded skill set, then he has a chance. But he has some couple red flags on him.
Yeah. Here's another guy that I'm just really not too high on compared to consensus. He's just a little too slender. Maybe he can pack on some pounds before his rookie year or even throughout the first couple years of his career. But like you said, just kind of prototypes to like a more inconsistent receiver that you'll have some boom games, but most of the time he probably won't produce. But yeah, I think that's the
Yeah.
last guy we got today.
Yep, that's our last guy. This will probably be our last breaking down receivers specifically before the draft. Obviously, we'll do some kind of rankings and tier list after, and we do have a few more guys that we're gonna go over in a separate video. Just some guys from all positions that we didn't get to fit in any of our videos. So keep a lookout for that. And as we said, please give us a like, subscribe. It's gonna help the channel. Nick, any outgoing words about any of these receivers?
Well, Keon Coleman, very high on him. Be on the lookout. I think he's going to have a great NFL career. I'm happy that he's moving down draft boards right now. That means I'll get him for cheaper. So,
There you go. Well, it's been Big Time Fantasy Football, guys. Have a good one.
thanks, guys.